Hi, everyone, and welcome to, I believe, the second call in the Climate Courage campaign series. My name is Emma Watson. I'm the Director of Curriculum at Our Youth for the Climate, which is abbreviated as OY4C. I'll be talking about our resource, which is called the OY4C curriculum. I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to be here and about the resource to spread climate education. It would be great if people could also introduce themselves in the chat, maybe put their professional role, why they've joined this call today, what you're hoping to get out of the information. And then I'll describe what I'll cover today. I'll briefly introduce the organization of OY4C, but then the bulk of the time will be spent talking about the curriculum resource, what it is, what it looks like from the student's perspective, and then what's happening now with the curriculum out in teaching environments and how you can get involved. So I will note that throughout this presentation and throughout the curriculum, we refer to climate change as the climate crisis because we believe that by not correctly addressing an issue, we lessen the necessary response. So that's just a little note. And our organization of OI4C, Our Youth for the Climate, we're a global grassroots and youth-driven organization. It's 100% volunteer-based and remote, and we aim to catalyze systemic change by providing high-quality and accessible climate education to the next generation of leaders. So we really hope to foster widespread awareness and action, really by getting young people involved in this issue. That being said, our team currently consists of 45 global and online members. We're aged about 14 to 24, which means we bring in the perspective of current students. Many of us are in full-time education right now, so we really understand where formal education has its strengths and weaknesses when it comes to climate education. A bit about our reach. A global audience. This map shows people that reach through social media. They have taken our pledge, which is a digital and verbal commitment to environmentalism. But our curriculum is also a global initiative, and our team has members from around the world. A strong emphasis in English-speaking countries, just because we're an English-speaking team, but we still have members throughout the world. I like to start off by thinking about this particular statistic that relates to climate education. So if people would like to put in the chat any ideas on what this 53% means, how it could relate to global climate education and just modern day education. Okay, as people just had a minute to think, I will say that this is the percentage of world national curricula that don't make any reference to climate education. So this is from a UNESCO study in 2021, and we think that it really just highlights the broad lack of systemic climate education in the world. If you dive into the complexities of the statistic, it does represent national level curricula. So there could be local level curriculums that really address the climate crisis. But if you flip that and think about it conversely, it also means that 47% of national curricula reference climate change. But it doesn't guarantee that it's quality information. It could just be a reference. And it doesn't cover the complexities of the climate crisis. It tends to cover only the scientific aspects and really neglect a lot of the social dimensions. I personally learned about the effects of greenhouse gases and how the process of climate change works, but I don't know about if any of you ever heard in formal education about climate justice or eco-anxiety, but these are topics that are very often left out of formal education. And also the existing climate education curricula tend to leave out the solutions to climate change, which really perpetuates eco-anxiety rather than motivating students. So there's really just a widespread need to provide new, higher quality education for the climate on a global level. And we are beginning to see this change. It's why everyone is gathered here today. It's why many governments, including the UK, are changing their education standards. But there's often still this disconnect between how we truly support students and how we get these educational resources into classrooms and other learning environments. So OI4C is hoping to solve this issue with the OI4C curriculum, with this climate education curriculum. It's the first ever of its kind that was built by and for young people, with the main goal of making foundational climate knowledge accessible to the next generation of leaders all around the world. I think this particular resource is a little bit unique in what it does because it was built by young people who are experts in what young people are already lacking. So we created these materials to specifically address the needs of young people in educational environments. We've taken action to provide these resources so that the next generation does not experience the same problems that many of us experienced. And one of the main reasons we were actually able to create the curriculum is because young people are going out and looking for climate education. So many people are wanting to get involved and they're trying to find lots of ways. That's These groups of young people are how we were able to write and test drive the OI4C curriculum. Um, and now we're hoping that students are able to use this resource because rather than just going to informal education sources, they can come across this resource and they actually bring it back to their own community. So rather than learning just independently, they can also share it with their peers. So the OI4C curriculum is organized into 12 interdisciplinary topics. So some of them are more traditional climate knowledge. This would be your emissions, plastic waste, pollution, but some of them also cover the commonly neglected social dimensions of the climate crisis, such as climate justice or how Indigenous peoples are affected by climate change. All teaching material is provided for each topic, including lesson plans, visual presentations, and quizzes. And the information is introductory, but it's comprehensive and impactful. It's also good to note that it can be accessible to a range of different ages because many individuals are lacking this foundational knowledge. So it was originally designed for students aged 14 to 18, but we found that students at the lower grade levels are still able to gain impactful knowledge from it. It might just be up to the teacher if they just determine if the reading level is really appropriate for their students. Above that grade level, I would say we still aren't finding any issues because students above 18 are able to easily understand it. They weren't educated on a lot of the issues, or it's just framing them in ways that they weren't quite able to gain in education previously. Maybe it's just summarizing the scientific information in a way that's comprehensible and is more useful for conversations about the climate crisis. We also follow each topic with an activity because by doing this, we are able to intertwine knowledge with action and we build the habit of turning information into action rather than eco-anxiety. We aim for this to be a proactive curriculum that includes both traditional learning, but it also has that increased engagement and better retention of knowledge. And we do that by providing this action that's tying climate education to climate action and really making that connect between learning the information and then bringing it out into the world. As a youth organization, we often work to make the curriculum a student-led initiative. This isn't always the case, but our primary outreach strategy is to go to young people, share the opportunity with them, and then have them bring it to their school. This way, they can lead the integration and the specific planning details associated with their school. The student is already aware of their educational environment's needs, and so then they can facilitate this, they can take on the role of being a student leader, and we can empower them to take action. And this has been the case for around half of the schools where we have brought the OI4C curriculum to. In the other half of cases, we do work directly with teachers to integrate the materials into their classrooms. It's a fully developed open education resource ready for immediate implementation, and I'll share more on how you can do that towards the end. If in covering the OI4C curriculum, you cover one topic per week, it works out to be a 14-week cycle because we have the 12 topics and then an introduction and a conclusion. And it's around an hour and 45 minutes per topic, which includes the lecture, the activity, and the quiz. Just a quick note on the reason resources provided with the quiz. We do have answer keys, and we provide it as a PDF form or also as a Google form. So it's really adaptable for classrooms that are focused on more of the paper in-person learning or if they incorporate more digital activities. We have further teacher support resources, which includes a document on how to teach the OI4C curriculum, as well as a supplemental video that we created in partnership with ThoughtBox Education, just to further prepare teachers for covering these sorts of materials and engaging their students in conversations related to the climate crisis. For any student that completes the 14-week cycle, has recurring attendance, and accomplishes all of the quizzes above a certain mark, we offer certifications. So this is something that the student could write about either on their CV or in applications for further education, just to highlight that they have this baseline knowledge of climate change. Or the school can also use these certifications just for an easy way to understand how many students are receiving this climate education per year and really just putting it in a statistic for them. So this is quite the fun bit where everyone gets to take on the role of a student in a classroom, where I'll show you what the OI4C curriculum looks like by going through an abbreviated version of one of our topics. We'll cover a couple of the introductions to food management because this topic talks about some of the scientific aspects of how food relates to the climate crisis, but it also addresses some of the social injustices that are associated with this issue. So here's another opportunity for people to be active in the chat. We love to start conversations with students in classrooms. And so sometimes that starts by, at the beginning of a topic, you ask students what they're already aware of. And it's just a great idea for teachers to understand what their students are coming into the classroom with. So please feel free to put what you already know about food management in that chat. All of the topics start out by stating the aims. For example, with food management, the goals are for students to just understand the issue and how it's connected with the climate crisis, talk about solutions and how they can get involved, delivering these concepts in a way that students can connect them with their daily life, and then also just encouraging them to make a positive impact in addressing real-world climate and social issues. We also start out the topic with a couple of key terms, just so that students are better able to understand the vocabulary of some of these more complex climate change topics. In this topic, we'll use the word regenerative agriculture, which we describe as different from sustainable agriculture. Sustainable really focuses on the neutrality, whereas regenerative deals with restoring the environment in a way that makes it better than we started. So putting stuff back into the earth and not just neutral, but having that positive impact. We'll also talk about circular systems, which is really just a system where we don't need to add in new resources. They're able to self-sustain and they focus on the 3 Rs: reuse, recycle, and repurpose. We then move on to more of the main information of a topic, which is broken down into some subtopics. The first one here being food waste. Leftover food has a remarkable impact on our planet. Unfortunately, food is wasted every day, and most of it ends up in landfills. Globally, an estimated 13% of food produced is wasted between harvest and retail, and that number is 17% of food produced is wasted between retail, households, and food services. According to the European Commission, over 50 million metric tons of food waste, which works out to be 131 kilograms per person, are generated annually, and that has an associated market value of 138 billion euros. While sitting in landfills, the food slowly rots away, releasing a gas called methane, or CH4. Methane is a greenhouse gas, and its buildup in the atmosphere is a strong contributor to global warming, which is why throwing away food has such dangerous consequences. Worldwide, the data is difficult to measure exactly, but some estimates of food waste are much higher than 17% and could be as high as one third of food produced is actually getting thrown away uneaten. The problem is such a determining component of our environment that if food waste were its own country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter of all countries. Almost everything with food starts with the farm, and farming plays a huge role in food, how food is made, and its impact on the environment. It can be a huge contributor to emissions and pollutions. However, certain methods of farming can drastically reduce these harmful consequences and even help the planet. Regenerative farming goes beyond the concept of sustainable farming. With such methods like intercropping, zero tilling, and waste recycling, it aims to cooperate and strengthen the surrounding environment and ecosystems. Every time something is taken from the land, regenerative farming techniques are used to restore it. Regenerative farming, therefore, distinguishes itself from sustainable farming, which really is only taking that neutral approach. One other method is crop rotation, which is credited to the work of agricultural scientist George Washington Carver. And this entails swapping out crops like cotton with nitrogen-fixing legumes such as peas or peanuts. Carver recognized that this rotation method rejuvenates the soil by replenishing crucial nitrogen levels, thereby preventing the depletion of essential natural nutrients in the land. Ultimately, crop rotation fosters sustainable soil fertility and contributes to the long-term productivity of agricultural areas. Throughout the OI4C curriculum, we seek to really enforce the idea of intersectionalism in environmentalism. However, in this specific topic, we even make an additional note about intersectionality in food management because it can be an issue where intersectionality is often forgotten. So we note that although we can help on an individual level to counteract the lack of policies, it's also important to keep in mind that a sustainable diet is not necessarily accessible to everyone. Low-income communities, marginalized communities, and communities of people of color suffer a disproportionate majority of health and economic disparity, often associated with food management. And so essentially here we just like to note that, there are some changes you can make in your own life that make your diet more sustainable, but those might not be possible for people that are facing food insecurity. In every topic, we include youth climate activist examples, and this is really to empower the students to see that other young people are getting involved in the climate crisis and showing them how they can also take part. In this topic, we cover FarmLink Founders, which was founded by Aidan Riley, James Kankoff, and Ben Collier during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The FarmLink project emerged as a response to supply chain issues and increased diversity students in lockdown. It connects local farmers with surplus produce to the communities in need. They began with the delivery of over 10,000 eggs to a specific food bank in Santa Monica, California, but it's since grown to distribute over 70 million pounds of food. By bridging the gap between surplus farms and food banks, the project aims to tackle food insecurity, reduce carbon emissions, and nurture future changemakers while promoting sustainable farming and healthier produce access. We also include the example of Aziz Salawu, a Nigerian advocate who is deeply engaged in youth agriculture and climate activism. As the founder and executive director of Community Action for Food Security, he spearheads efforts to enhance food security across Africa. Additionally, he holds significant roles such as youth leader for the UN Food Systems Summit Dialogue, and he's a member of various influential initiatives related to climate action and sustainable development. Working across governmental, policy, and community levels, Aziz is committed to combating hunger and malnutrition, pledging to leverage his position for advocacy. Other ways that we like to encourage students to get involved is by proposing job ideas related to the field of the topic. So related to food management, we suggest the fields of research, agricultural policy, and food access and distribution. This is the breakdown of how each of the 12 topics within the curriculum is structured. It starts by stating the aims and the key terms. We also include a brief introduction, which wasn't covered for food management in this example, but every topic will just have a little bit of an introduction to what students will be learning before getting into the main information subtopics of each example. Then there are always youth climate activist examples. There's a conclusion just to wrap up some of the big ideas before recapping the skills learned, proposing potential job ideas in the field, We also provide future or further resources so that if a student is particularly passionate about an individual topic, or if they're just hoping to learn more, they can go to a list of websites or papers that we propose and they can seek out that additional learning. And then with all the topics, we include that action. So we hope that by providing the actions to be completed immediately, and then the job ideas for students to potentially pursue in the future, we're giving students a way to be a part of the active solution to the climate crisis rather than dwelling in eco-anxiety. So a couple of notes about where the curriculum is at now and how you can get involved. Last year, we provided an online cycle of the curriculum to a global audience of 25 students as a teaching trial. This is a little bit of that, and they found that the information was a comprehensive introduction to a range of climate issues, and they consistently responded that they felt empowered to take action and make a change. Right now, we have the curriculum in 6 in-person learning environments across the world. We have 2 in the United States, 2 in Europe, 1 in Peru, and 1 in Mauritius. And all of these schools are beginning to teach the curriculum this autumn. The curriculum is a generally flexible set of teaching materials. So many schools have integrated these into existing classes, often science classes, but it could be brought into almost any classroom because the climate crisis intersects with so many different aspects of our lives. We found that this is a very popular way for teachers to bring in the materials because a teacher has a generally good amount of control over their own teaching environment and they understand what gaps their students have in the knowledge and where they have the time to incorporate additional material. We actually had one environmental science class that focused on just bringing in the social topics because they already had existing material for a lot of the science. So they didn't need our materials on emissions because they were already teaching about emissions. So they instead focused on the material for the social issues. We've had one school bring in the curriculum as a separate class where they have students from each grade level learning a couple of topics each year. And so as students go through each year of schooling at that location, they cover the entire curriculum just with a couple of topics each year. Over 50 students will be receiving this in-person education this term, and OI4C offers ongoing support to teachers, students, and any other staff members involved in the curriculum. So a little bit about how you can get involved depending on what your role is. I always like to start off with students just because we are a youth-driven organization. I don't know if we necessarily have any students or them. So if you know of any students that would be interested in getting involved, they can register their interest in the curriculum using an easy form that we have. I can link it in the chat. And this just lets us know a little bit about the student and their school, how they're hoping to get involved. It lets us know their preliminary plan for bringing in the curriculum. And then after this form is filled out, the student contacts their school and they start organizing the integration strategy and details. After everything is organized, then the school confirms using a second form. For any schools or staff members, the process is very similar. You can use that same form. It just lets us know that information about you and your school, how you're planning to use it. I will note that that form was initially designed for students, so it might ask you what your previous leadership experience was, but that was intended to be put there for when we were working with students that weren't as familiar with climate education and would need some support for us. So that form is still easily used by schools, but you might see how it was designed for students. We still recommend finding a student leader, even if a teacher is working directly with us. Once again, we really hope to empower young people to get involved in the climate crisis, offer that student leadership position, and then that student is also able to provide some more support to the teacher so they can alleviate some of the workload of coordinating between the school and between OI4C, and they can just really get involved. Once again, Once you submit your interest, you just organize the integration strategy within the school and then confirm using our second form. On our website, we have quite a lot of information about integration and some resources. We have our launch brief. We have a whole guide to integration that walks you through the process from the minute you find out about the curriculum until you can begin teaching. So our website has a lot of those resources that you can use. And I will once again link that in the chat. If you aren't involved in an educational environment, there's still ways to get involved with the curriculum or with our Youth for the Climate. So in terms of collaborations, we're currently looking for new experts to review the content and further accredit it so that we can gain that reach and really show off the high quality of the education. We're also looking to implement collaborative resources. If you know of any other education or organizations that are looking to maybe host a climate cafe or some in-person event where they'd like an easy material to teach, they could use out of the curriculum or any ideas like this. But please feel free to email us. I've got the email on our screen there with any collaboration ideas. And then we are a grassroots organization, so I always like to note ways people can get involved, even if they aren't able to integrate the curriculum. Word of mouth is such a huge way for us to get our initiatives out there and spread our work with more people. We also have quite a social media presence catering to young people and getting young people initially hooked on climate activism. So we have our social media accounts you could follow. If you know of any young people that are hoping to get more directly involved, they could apply to join our team. And then we also have our OI4C pledge, which is once again that verbal digital commitment to pledging to climate activism. So I have just a little bit of information about how you can connect if that's useful. And then I will open up the screen for the time for questions.
So do you want to maybe go back to a setting where we can all see each other's faces, and whoever has a question, please feel free to raise your hand and or put it in the chat if you would rather, and we'll have some time here and then move on into breakout rooms after that. Well, I'd like to start, if you don't mind, Emma, if you could share a bit more about, I'm aware that you are starting to pilot this curriculum in 6 different schools, one of which is in the UK starting this September. And if you
Mhm.
could share a bit more about basically the journey in reviewing your curriculum. I don't know, I'm aware there's 2 other members of your team here, so if they have anything else to add to that, please chime in. But basically, how did you go from, semi-self-taught, forum to a curriculum that is adaptable and expandable?
Yeah, so I think it really starts with the early organization was teaching sporadic Zoom classes just to a group of young people that would log on each week, hoping to learn a little bit about relevant climate topics of that week. And then I think the organization realized we need to make this a bit more formal. We need to make this a way that can get out into worldwide classrooms. And so then the development of the curriculum became about a 2 year long process. It was a group of around 100 young people that gave input on what topics they think were missing from their current education, what they wanted to hear about. And then it was workshopped with several experts on those topics before then a group of our writers, often within our volunteer age range, 14 to 24, they started writing the curriculum. We began the expert review process in late 2023, I want to say, before we launched in February of this year. And then between February and now, it has just been an outreach process of getting it into these in-person schools. So I think we have almost these hubs. We have at Europe Hub, we have schools in the US and North America. And then we're also working on outreach to schools that are interested in other regions of the world, but we've got those 2 big ones right now. Um, I'll remarks, I'll pass the mic over to either of my other team members that want to add anything about the process of the idea of the curriculum to where we are now.
Hi everyone. Ava here, founder and executive director here at our Youth at Climate. Super excited and grateful to have you all here learning about curriculum. Also, thank you, Emma, for presenting it. Just want to quickly add as well, we are in the process of working with experts, whether that be university professors or experts in their field, to have them ongoing and continuously provide feedback. So the process of development is ongoing. We've come out, yeah, I think Emma pretty much covered everything in there. We did an online session, kind of a trial run this time last year, had about 25 students on board, provide feedback, and then did that revamp version 2.0, if you will. And it's out now and in those 6 schools who are very soon to start teaching it. I think that's everything of relevance to your question. Sasha, am I missing anything potentially? If you also just want to say hi, maybe now's the time.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Thank you, Ava. I'm Sasha. I'm the Director of Operations at Our Youth for the Climate. My colleagues both explained it very well. And yeah, super excited to see how we can work on integrating the curriculum at some of your schools potentially.
Absolutely. So I see Gareth has asked a question in here, asking if we also give content that supports the processing of emotions that come with this type of work. Yes. So alongside every topic, we have an action item at the end, and we promote it with the intention of having students build the habit of turning information into action so that they're not left feeling overwhelmed, and it's rather empowering. That's one aspect of it. We also have one of our 12 topics on eco-anxiety, teaching what it means and potentially how to engage and sit with it. We also have a resource in there. We have collaborated with Thoughtbox Education, and they offer an hour session. It's a video that pre-recorded. You can watch it. It's in there. Essentially on how a teacher can provide space and welcome those emotions, and also just how to navigate it. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. We are very much open to receiving any feedback and improvements. It's definitely a space we're learning to navigate as well. So more than welcome to share.
Becky, would you like to ask your question as you're leaving soon?
Yes, so I've got to go back to school, so I'm really sorry, but I think this is amazing. And I've been looking for things like this for ages. Honestly, it's a real triumph. And I wish that we could, well, there's a few things I could help with. I know and work with Jess Pepper, who runs Climate Cafe, who set up the whole thing. I also do quite a lot of work with people at the University of Reading in the UK who are like in charge of making the hub for resources. So that may be somewhere where you could showcase your resources. For example, they're doing lots of teacher training events in the next few weeks. But I could talk to Andrew Charlton Perez, who's like in charge of it, or perhaps arrange for you to meet with him or something like that. Because honestly, we need this in every school. I've been battling at my school to try and do more of this stuff. Is it possible to say which school you are working with in the UK or
So it's actually a junior school in the UK.
Oh,
It was
right.
designed for that age range of 14 to 18, but then
Oh,
we had one of the teachers at this school got connected with us through some tree planting organization they're a part of. And then this teacher was like, I need these in my
yeah,
classroom. I'll make some adjustments for the reading level, but that
brilliant.
is it's a junior school in Reading, I believe.
Oh, really? In Reading, that's interesting because Reading is
Mhm.
this hub of the, but we could make it so that there's a whole review, and I've already written to Becky Francis, who's leading the review of education in the UK. This needs to go in. I mean, seriously, it needs to go in. And also, Uh, I'm sorry, I've got to go, and don't mean to be too quick or anything, but I've set up this thing because one of the things I've always done is try to take young people's contributions seriously. So I set up a big charity called the Institute for Research in Schools, which allowed young people to do genuine research while they're at school. And we did loads of amazing things. I'm a physicist. We put payloads up in space. And now I thought what I could do to help is, because I know there's, oh, well, I didn't know of this, so this is brilliant. But I thought my contribution could be that I could make a mechanism so that students, once they're, really up and aware and have learnt this amazing stuff through your course, could they then think about how they contribute to changing it? And so could they innovate for social transformation? Could they innovate for ideas? Could they think about how they're going to exchange ideas across the world so they understand the stories where climate change is happening really horrendously right now? Could there be far more connection? So I've set up this charity called Project Earth. ProjectEarth.global is the website. And it could be like a real next step. Once students have done your course and want to say, because I've got 50 advisors and people like Michael Mann, amazing people from across the world who are prepared to support student innovation. So I'd love to work with you on this. It would be amazing.
First of all,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Becky, for suggesting this. We've seen your email, so we will absolutely follow up on that and discuss the possibilities of that. So thank you for bringing it up as well. Definitely something that we are excited about. We're very much starting to reach the discovery point of post-curriculum teaching, and so that's been in our conversation. So definitely happy to explore that.
Brilliant. Thanks. And I'm so sorry I've got to go, but I've got to get back to work, to school. So thank you.
Enjoy.
Really brilliant. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Bye.
And I've just popped in the chat the school. It's called Shinfield St. Mary Junior School, if anyone is interested in Reading. I've got a couple hands. Do you want to take?
I think I saw Les had his hand up quite early on.
Yeah, thank you. Love the energy levels from Becky. I put in the chat about the job ideas bit that you add into the topic sessions, and I guess every job is a climate job, because everything needs to change. But I just wonder if that's something that you could say a bit more about, and whether that's something that you've got sort of plans to develop any further, or because kind of helping young people to see that agency is not just kind of campaigning or things they can do themselves, but that there's a whole future that they can get involved with.
Yeah, I think the reason we put job ideas in there is for that sort of direct link, but ultimately we wanted this sort of baseline knowledge for all students so that they would bring environmentalism into whatever career they go into. I think that there's an idea that we talk about internally a little bit of like this unsustainable career and like taking jobs that have historically been unsustainable and making them that shift towards sustainable. It's something that we've tried to put into the curriculum just by educating students and making them aware of the issues. And then I think the job ideas is sort of okay, here's one idea if this is something you are so incredibly passionate about and you want to be doing this every single day of your life. But whatever you do, this you need to be taking into your career.
And quickly, just to add on to that, absolutely well said, Emma. At the minute, it is just the list of potential jobs relevant to that topic. And it's just to get the ideas going. It's to, for students to correlate and start picturing a career, a potential career. I think we're going to look into how do we frame that specifically in those sections a little bit better so that we have students recognize it expands past that scope. If you do have specific suggestions on how we can grow outside of that or how we can broaden that scope, essentially, we're very open to it as well. But yes, at the minute, it's just a list to hopefully get some thoughts going. Megan? Yeah.
Hi. Hey. So, two questions, if that's okay. The first one is about whether or not you guys are in any way partnered with Teach the Future in the UK.
No, we've had conversations. Unfortunately, our director of partnerships is not here to speak a little bit further on that, but we've had conversation. Nothing has come from it.
Okay, that's
Yet.
interesting. That's a shame. But yeah, I'm glad to hear you're aware of them, because they've been working to get a bill through Parliament for the last 2 years in the UK. It's stalled at kind of the first of 12 steps, unfortunately. But they have actually co-created a curriculum with some curriculum experts, and they've provided like sample curricula for several subjects that the UK teaches at secondary school level. So although you may not have had any kind of success so far, I would definitely encourage some as much joined upness as possible, because I think one thing that really happens in the climate movement is a lot of fracturing, and like not a very joined up approach. So it's amazing to see you guys doing this, and serious kudos to you. But I think it would be really powerful to see lots of young people and lots of different youth-led organizations come together to really like fight that together and push that corner together. So that was the first thing. And then the second is just around uh whether I'm just curious about, I'm sorry, to give you some context, I'm just at the tail end of my master's degree, which at the moment it's in sustainable construction and sustainable building. But it specifically, my dissertation, my thesis is looking at further education in the UK and how we build the skills, the sustainability skills needed for further education trades in the UK. So like, how do you build sustainability skills into further education training for construction people, but also for, to everyone's point, like every job is a climate job and will be in the future. So how do you get that in the door everywhere? I'm looking at it through a buildings lens because that's my background and specialism. But we're not teaching our tradespeople in the UK anything to do with sustainability, broad picture wise. And we're not teaching them really the skills. And when we do, it's very siloed. It's like, you go on a retrofit course or an energy assessor course, but it's never the full picture. You're not really getting that full sense of what sustainability is. So I've been looking a lot at how we teach our 16 to 18-year-olds in further education colleges about trades and about sustainability and how those go hand in hand. And I'm just curious if you guys have done any thinking about how this curriculum might spill over into further education rather than secondary school education. And if not, I completely understand, but I'd just be really curious to hear your thoughts on it if you have got there.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. So initially, I think there's a strong lack of just basic foundational climate education. And we saw that with the 53% that just make any reference, not necessarily quality reference. And so we believe our job in the process of education is to set that foundation as early as possible. It made sense that we jumped in at that age group because that's where our team our team age range, and so we have the expertise in that space. So in that sense, it spills over by hopefully, well, the intention is to get students, one, aware, two, educated so that they can continue at university, hopefully in that path. And so it's to put them essentially on that trajectory. We have had conversations, so Emma, Sasha, myself actually are all at UCL here in London, and we've had conversations at the university level, and we have gotten quite a bit of pushback because there's a lot more due diligence and requirements needed at that level. And so at the moment for the curriculum, we've decided to put the pushing it into that space on pause and focus very much on the 14 to 18 range. But there absolutely is inevitably going to be correlations because it's part of that education process. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, it gives me a sense of what you're thinking about. And I can actually, with regards to the university side of things, I've been in contact with a great organization called The Edge, who work at they bring together the different areas of the built environment, but they're focused on education and sustainability in education. And they are actually working with university accrediting bodies. So, for example, the ARB for architects, and various other professional bodies to try to change the learning outcomes and the accreditation system for university level courses. So if you were interested in speaking to them about how to potentially well, how to leverage their knowledge about doing that in order to use that with your own university, I'd be really happy to put you guys in touch with them if that's useful.
Yeah, that actually sounds very interesting. So we will follow up on that for that specific contact. So we do very much appreciate that suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
Yeah, and
any
I'll just note that we noticed that pushback when having preliminary conversations with our own university. And then also, we're trying to make it as widespread of an education as possible. And oftentimes, there are these university courses that deal specifically with climate education, whereas we're targeting that age range where everyone is still involved in education rather than hitting that paywall of university and we can get to as many students as possible. Right now, we're still in the early stages of that where it's 6 schools, but we're aiming for a much broader outreach at that age level. And then I think our next hand was from David.
Hi. Yeah, so congrats first to you all. This is a great venture, and it's amazing and heartening to see your youthful energy. Brilliant. Keep it up. I suppose my question doesn't come from a professional perspective. I'm one of those university stick in the mud, so I'm not going to try and push on that, but more actually as a parent. So you mentioned what you could do as a school, what you can do as a student, but what could you do as a parent? Is it just basically the student line? I mean, I'd be quite interested to take this to my daughter's schools, but I think I'd like to know what it is I'm selling them first.
Yeah, so I think we would work with you quite similarly how we work with alumni. Like we work with many students that have just recently graduated and they have their connections to a school, but they aren't that active student. And so with any sort of parent that's hoping to get it into their child's school, we can speak with you as almost like that student. We can show you an example topic a little bit more in depth than the 10-minute version of food management. And then also some of the more supplemental resources, our launch brief, that guide to integration. We also have a summary of all of the content that's covered by the curriculum because they are some more in-depth topics, being able to understand, okay, what subtopics are included. You're talking about eco-anxiety. What are you talking about in eco-anxiety? So we have some of those summaries, and I think the most straightforward action plan from that parent's perspective is working with a child school.
Thanks.
And yeah, no problem. Adam?
Hi. Thanks for letting me speak. Yeah, I too think that all this stuff is really good. And I was gobsmacked when you said you're at UCL, because that was actually my question is, do you know what UCL is doing with their climate hub and their climate ambassadors, which they're doing for the Department of the Environment? I'm working for a charity called EcoCounts, and we're building up a group of people, local people, so from students all the way up to retirees and everybody, to try to be as low carbon as possible. And we've got some students from North London secondary schools, and they're saying, what can we do to raise awareness and all this kind of stuff? And the teachers don't teach it, they don't know anything, blah, blah, blah. And then I discovered that actually one of their schools has got one of these climate ambassadors. And so I've been emailing them at the UCL climate. Is it Climate Action Hub or a Climate Hub? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm familiar with the part of UCL that deals with, I think it has sustainability in the title.
It was
Or
in the first, if I may, in the first call of this resource series, Louise, who is here, should be here, along with Lizzie Insall from the DFE, presented it. If you want more details on applying to that scheme or understanding how it works, although we understand it's not, at the very forefront of what could be done in terms of a door for engagement and for getting better curriculum into schools and engagement. it's a definite possibility that's available now. So,
well, I know nothing about it apart from the fact that it exists, and I've got their web page, and I've emailed them asking about it, but I haven't really got anything definitive back. I was kind of like shuttled from one email to another, and I'm still trying to nail down like who the teacher is at the school where the pupils are, so they can kind of go and talk to them. But yeah, I kind of figure that if the Department of the Environment is doing this Climate Ambassadors project and the UCL is running that for London, then and you're right there. I don't know why did you say you're there, or you're affiliated, or you're actually on the premises, or I don't know. Are
So
you in
we're
North London?
students. So um, I think we live throughout London. We're students at UCL. Our organization of our Youth for the Climate is not affiliated with the university in any way. It just so happens that we have quite a few of our members that are full-time students there.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, so you know the professors like Mark Maslin, who's really cool. I really love that guy. And there's some others who are really good there as well. Sorry, getting away from the subject, which was the UCL Climate Hub. I think it's the leader is well, what do you want me to do? Shall I instead of boring everybody else with contact details, shall I email you? Shall I email one of you, and we can do that via email, and I'll tell you who I was talking to, and you can tell me whether it's worth continuing.
Yeah, if we could get in touch and talk about the climate hub, I think that would end up being a whole discussion about how I4C can get involved and your connection with the pupils in North London. Yeah, I think it would be great to just email and start that conversation.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll send you an email then. Great.
Thank you. Louise?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I mean, thanks so much, guys, for presenting that. It's really impressive to see. Like, I love the range of topics, and I love the inclusion of, examples of activism and actions taking place. That's really inspiring, and the sort of jobs ideas as well. I think that's a really nice hook for young people. I actually just put my hand up to riff off some of what Adam was saying. I believe it's Krista Mayer at the Climate Action Unit at UCL, who is also the lead of the London Climate Ambassadors scheme. And also within the UCL, which was the Institute of Education, there's the UCL Centre for Climate Change and Sustainability Education, PEEPS, and that's Nicola Walsh. If you guys want me to introduce you to those guys, let me know. I don't know Chris very well at all, but happy to do that. As I've got the floor, I might just maybe reflect on what I was considering, which was, oh yeah, so with my sort of teacher hat on, I used to be a teacher, thinking of like the sort of 4-part lesson of, you start to introduce a topic, do an action or an activity or something to sort of embed the topic, and then a plenary. Forgive me if I missed it, but is that sort of action or doing something with the topic activity, is that included in each of the topic units? It is.
Yeah, so we have 12 different activities, one after each topic, and they all link to the individual topic. For example, with this food management topic, I think the activity is to make a regenerative garden, either an actual one or to create the plans for one, or I think that maybe have students make a composter. Some of them deal more so with doing research, like where you can't get actually out into the world. We suggest that students research like initiatives in their local area, or for the topic on how Indigenous peoples are affected by climate change, we ask students to consider what tribal lands they're located on and how the Indigenous people native to those areas relate to the climate crisis.
Perfect. Great. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think I potentially missed that, but that's wonderful. It's nice you're giving lots of different activity examples so there can be that sort of differentiation, if possible. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think we strove to make activities that could be done remote when possible. So while there's opportunities to get out into the world, sometimes it is thinking about the theory of what could do. So for online rooms where we have that sort of flexibility where students are continuing to think about the topic, even if they can't get onto the world. Okay. And then Adam, is that a hand again?
Yes, yes, sorry, a completely different topic this time. The social media and outreach and publicity and campaigning, getting yourself out there is obviously a big question. I was just wanted to ask what you're doing, because I know that it's difficult because I try it myself and it needs tons of resources which often we don't have. Like for instance, the other day there was the Climate Fresque organization partnered up with somebody, I can't remember who they were, but they were a big influencer name on Instagram, to do a Climate Fresque workshop, which explains the science over a 3-hour workshop. And they had an ongoing campaign for about a month before the event. And they had it on Instagram, they had it on LinkedIn, on Twitter, they had newsletters. It was just basically in my face the whole month. And then they had 4 people turn up online and 5 people in person. And it was kind of like, man, I don't know. I don't know how to make it. I don't know how to make it any easier myself, but I'd love to find out. I'd love to get more success in that area, because I sometimes come up with those kind of results myself, and it's really disheartening. Are you working on that at all, or do you rely on basically newsletters, word of mouth, or what do you do?
Yeah, so if it is of any comfort, we definitely do that type of outreach and don't get the outcome that we always look for. It's a kind of a hit or miss, and that's how we feel like social media works. It also depends a lot on our capacity as an organization, and where our focus is at the time. What we have noticed is for social media to be continuously successful, we have to continuously be putting a lot of energy into it. So at the moment, we have a media team, which comprises of a variety of different formats, story, video, feed, and we have creators in that space, a whole system in there to ensure that ongoing outreach. We're heavily present on TikTok, and that is where our main outreach is to new audience. And that is because social media works wonders in sometimes having videos going viral, reaching a whole bunch of new members. And that is originally the outcome of, personally, I've had a presence on social media. I've had some time to explore that space and develop some skills in it. So that's transferred over into the organization. I think if it's well received, maybe a piece of advice is the continuous aspect, and to ongoing post just anything relevant at the time. And then when a campaign comes around, the engagement is already likely to be higher. And so those specific campaigns at the time will potentially do better because there's a continuously engaged audience. Yes, that's probably what I can keep quite level.
Yeah, and just to briefly note, I think something that we've noticed is that with social media, the whole concept of it is that you are speaking at people. And so then when you try to have something more interactive, you're completely changing the dynamic from you just putting information out into the world to now you're expecting people to engage with it and be active and have a response. And then instead of talking at people, you're trying to have a conversation. So shifting that dynamic, I think it's quite the leap. So necessarily, the social media engagement doesn't necessarily mean it translates to actual action and interaction. Yahtzee?
Yeah, so it's just at this point in the call, I know the original intention was to have breakout rooms, but as it's a rather intimate group and most people have spoken at this point, we're wondering more if there are any questions for you guys to ask to the audience at this stage, or feedback or prompts, and if perhaps it might make sense to wrap up slightly earlier, say in 10 or 15 minutes, considering again the smaller size of the group.
Yeah, that sounds great. The activity was once again having people get involved in that sort of student perspective, and to take on one of the activities from the curriculum, which is certainly fun. But I think while we're having this interactive discussion, I'm happy to continue on in this group. And we already have, actually, I'll give Ava and Sasha a minute if they have questions for us to put out into this audience. No?
I might ask just a very generic one, either with a show of hands or emojis or whatever makes you happy. Do you feel like, sorry? Do you feel like you lacked, let's go with quality climate education in school/university? I'm seeing big head nods. Yes. Hands up. Does anyone disagree? Maybe put that in the chat to be a little bit more. No? Okay, so we agree there is a need for resources like this. Good. That's a good starting point. What is the most empowering, or impressive is not the right word, most engaging approach you believe young people have taken? What do you believe is going to be the most impactful to bring everyone along in the journey, whether that be climate education as a whole or on the ground action? I think everyone will vary depending on what they're currently involved in. But just interested to hear how you think young people are engaging other people in the most efficient way. Feel free to keep it in the concept of climate education as well, if you would like.
Ava, I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, but one of the reasons I have my hand up was just to ask if you guys have a way of encouraging young people, say those that are viewing your videos on TikTok, like, do you have any sort of like thing that they could take to their head teacher themselves to be sort of petitioning and putting that pester power to their teachers? Does that
Yes.
happen?
We've got two primary ones. The first one is the pledge. We offer a verbal commitment. I think it's one of those more common, it's less of a petition, but it's everyone verbally committing. And it's our way of essentially building an outreach in a community, and we have that list of members. The other one is definitely the curriculum, where they take the launch brief, they take the demonstrate interest form, and they learn about the curriculum, and then they go to their teacher. That is the primary action that we provide. And yeah, I think that's the first one that comes to mind. Emma, am I missing out?
Yeah. So I think the reason we created this sort of outreach strategy where we have an audience of young people, we share the curriculum with them, and then they bring that curriculum to their school, and then the school implements it from that sort of student leader, is because I think a lot of us in our team noticed that when we had an idea in our school systems, we had a project we were excited about, and we brought it to a teacher, we brought it to administration. They were generally supportive. They loved seeing their students getting excited about new education initiatives. And so we thought by having these young people get involved and for them to spearhead the effort in their own school, we thought these schools are much more likely to listen to their own students who they're currently educating rather than an organization they haven't heard of yet. So I think that was why we created the outreach strategy, both to give the students that leadership position, to empower them and make them feel active, and then also they're spreading that climate education with their community.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I think, again, as an ex-teacher, I think that would be so powerful. Apologies if you spoke to that earlier and I missed it with whatever was going on in my head. But yeah, I think that's fantastic. It's really the USP, isn't it, of what you're offering. So good on you guys.
And then I do have a question I'd like to ask because I think we have a lot of people that are associated with education environments, either current teachers or previous teachers. And I'd like to know what you think the biggest barrier is to getting climate education to students. Like, is it administration? Is it time? Is it policy? Like, what is the biggest barrier right now? Or is it the access to resources?
Emma, could you just say that once more?
Yes. So, from that sort of teacher or staff member perspective, what's the biggest barrier to get new climate education to students? Is it just the time in the classroom, the resources, anything like that?
Um, yeah, I'm not a teacher, but I've just done a lot of primary research with a lot of teachers about exactly this. And the, I mean, basically, it's what Patrick's saying here. It's like finding time in the curriculum. And once you've got a set of qualifications that have a set standard or a set list of learning outcomes, you can't deviate from those learning outcomes even if you want to, because that's what's going to be assessed. So that's what your qualification board has put together, and that's what your students are assessed against. And so to try to shoehorn in other things when teachers have such limited time, such limited resources. And actually, I think teacher training is also a big piece of this. A lot of teachers, especially from generations above, don't actually have this training themselves. They don't know enough about the climate emergency themselves, so trying to get them to train students on it is really hard. But they're not being given any space or time to do that, and certainly not any support to do it. And I think it's foolish to believe that there's not a political agenda at play here. You know, it's very, even when we look at the CCC in the UK or even the IPCC at the recent COP28, the head of the IPCC basically backed up what the chair of COP said. This guy who's the head of an oil company, the CEO of an oil company, said, I don't really see the problem with fossil fuels being in operation until 2050. The head of the IPCC, which is like the biggest scientific body of experts in the world on climate change, said, yes, he's essentially right. And while he was trying to be diplomatic, when we've got scientists saying things like that, the political and kind of massaging the message so that the politics don't go awry and so that diplomacy is maintained, I don't think we really have a strong hope of getting en masse schools on board. Or sorry, you could get teachers on board, but really they don't have as much power as they should have in a classroom. And at the same time, there's like a massive element of systems change. Like, I don't know that you can teach climate or sustainability education without teaching systems change, because they're so inextricably linked. And if you try to do one without the other, you're not talking about the root causes of climate change, you're just talking about the symptoms. And so to me, like, that's all interconnected. And there are teachers and so on this call who can speak more about what it's like to be trying to teach this, and not being supported to do so. And I'll hand over to let them do that. But yeah, I just think the systems change element is a really important thing to acknowledge, and that a lot of people are disempowered from activating change even when they want to.
Thank you. That's so much that we haven't necessarily heard from teachers before. I think anytime we've had a teaching environment tell us that they aren't able to bring in the curriculum, the only thing they really cite is time. They don't really get into the more complex issues because time is such a big issue. And so then they can easily tell us, like, oh, we have to focus on what our students will be tested on. And they can't really let us know what the more complex issues are that are stopping students from receiving that climate education.
Can I jump in on the politics?
Go ahead.
So in the DFE's original strategy, or the one that was written sort of in COP26, there was very little content about what climate education meant, and they also said we already do it in geography and science, but there was a larger chunk on why teachers shouldn't basically encourage systems change, or shouldn't, without mentioning Extinction Rebellion, it was to make sure teachers were being apolitical and not sending students down a let's rebel against the system and go on strikes and glue ourselves to a motorway or something. And there was a lot of that, and that pressure is very big. And I've written a sustainability curriculum for my school, and I do assemblies, and I have to be very careful about making sure you are presenting facts. You're not, and you're suggesting actions, but you aren't, breaking. Well, it's hard to teach about fast fashion without saying we need to stop consumerism and capitalism. But yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. It is written into the DFE strategy, and it is written into teachers' job descriptions that we cannot be political. And then that, so it does create a whole thing. Whereas, we do need systems change. We do need to think about the world differently. We need to think about jobs and work and sustainability. We need to think about it differently. And we're not really allowed to present that. Obviously, we try our best to, make the conclusion obvious, when teaching the facts, but.
Yeah, I think that is an issue that's coming up more and more frequently. Even last week in the call with the DFE, with the resource hub, someone mentioned the point that it's that there aren't many resources telling students how to get involved in environmental policy and taking that political side, but we aren't going to get that information from governmental organizations. So it is very tough to toe that line. I did want to note one thing in the chat that about the cost of the curriculum. Yes, it's 100% free. There's no fee to access any of the materials. They're all provided without cost to any educational environment that just wants to get them out to students. We as an organization don't have any funding. It didn't cost us anything to make the curriculum. That was a volunteer-based initiative, and we don't charge people to use it. And then I think the next hand was from Adam.
Yeah, hi, thanks again. I've been looking at this at the intersection with politics and power and all of this very closely in an attempt to find a way to find out why and what you can say. And I think I'll try to keep this really short, so hopefully it'll make sense, and hopefully I won't make it too long. But essentially, what we have is not a problem with capitalism. And now this is going to play into all sorts of people's sort of political mindset already. And they'll go, of course, it's a problem with capitalism. But actually, it's you have to stand back from your turn your political taste buds off for a moment and think about the problem that we are seeing so radically is a problem with the neoliberals, the neoliberal interpretation of capitalism, which promotes individualism, which promotes consumerism, which promotes money as the measure of all value, which promotes markets as the sole arbiter of that value, and with close to zero government as you can get, with all of that type of thing. And this is really the stuff out there that Trump wants to bring in with his 2024 agenda, and it is so bonkers that there's nobody in England that would ever support that, literally. And I think to be able to talk about why that's important now, you need to realize that you need to take in mind that this narrative, this public narrative of neoliberalism that we're subject to, that many of us are up in arms about, is just the public narrative. It's what the public in our country and around the Western world believe. And when you say something that we want to do this, and you get this reaction from people, oh no, that's never going to work. That's because of the public narrative that says that neoliberalism is the way we do things. Now, the thing about public narratives is that they change. In very, very potted history in 1929 in America with the Great Wall Street crash, and the following 10 years of the Great Depression. A new narrative came in that replaced whatever it was before that, and that it was called Keynesianism from the economist John Maynard Keynes. And he said, big government, we get in there and we invest public money into building up the state. And that served the world very well with World War II and the post-war reconstruction and everything. And that public narrative was dominant throughout those 3 decades. But it was replaced in the 1970s because it hit bumps in the road. It hit the oil crisis, it hit like inflation and all that sort of stuff. It was replaced by Thatcher and Reagan and neoliberalism.
Sorry, Adam.
And that is now, okay, I'll wrap up completely with one sentence. That is now the public narrative, and the 2008 crash and the following years of austerity tells everybody we have to replace it. This is the natural social function of replacing these narratives. And that is my attempt at being non-political.
Yeah, I think in terms of the politics side, within the curriculum, we have one topic that covers environmental policy and politics, and it essentially describes how government policy relates to carbon emissions, caps, these kinds of ideas. And we do suggest a template for students that want to get involved to email or contact their local representative and advocate for new laws. But we, as a peaceful organization that only engages in sort of these peaceful actions, we just encourage students to get involved by following the law and by just encouraging that sort of political action. In the other topics, we don't necessarily take any sort of political stance or anything. It's just providing that education related to the topic. Really, the topic is contained within one topic out of 12, and it is once again following that peaceful manner and action.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we do need to start wrapping up. I don't know, Louise, if you have some very final words. And
Thanks. Yeah, sorry, just wading into this debate, and I've spent some time thinking about it as well. And kind of echoing what Megan was saying in the chat is that I do think it's possible to tread that path very carefully and provide education that's just giving facts, but really that what we want to be encouraging for young people is the debate, encouraging them to discuss this as part of the lesson, to come up with independent, their own thinking around this topic themselves. And in that way, that they will probably come to these same conclusions that we're discussing here today. I do think, in a sense, it's possible to be slightly subversive without being ostensibly so, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, our goal is to essentially provide that baseline knowledge so that students can go out and learn more and foster some more in-depth opinions about these complex topics. But we just hope to provide that baseline level of necessary and comprehensive education.
Well, thank you very much, everyone from our Youth for the Climate for presenting. We'll definitely keep on making people aware that you're out there and hope to, remain in conversation and alliance. Thank you everyone for attending. Any feedback is welcome. I have posted the link to our next call with Letters to the Earth, which will be a really, simple workshop, which is very well adaptable for, especially for teachers who are struggling against curricular challenges. And, you can basically bring it in no matter what your school is, enabling you to do. And yeah, so thank you very much for coming, everyone, and we hope to see you all soon.
Thank you all for your time, and thank you to Climate Majority Project for hosting us on this Climate Courage campaign. It's an amazing opportunity to share the work that we do.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.